Howdy YouTube family, it's Bolt SRNA coming to you again with another day's topic. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about if male nurses get paid more just because they're men, and if we get special treatment just because we're men. Is it fair? Is it something that has been a myth that's been made up, or is it actually happening out there in healthcare? We'll talk about it today. All right, so the reason this topic came up was with the recent women's marches that have been going on, and the talk about gender equality and women in the workforce, things like that. They're hot topics, and I just kind of wanted to discuss something that I knew was going on in healthcare that I've seen and witnessed, and was curious to see what other people may have seen and witnessed who also work in healthcare. So everyone knows, well, most people should know, that nursing is about 90% women and about 10% men. So that means men are definitely the minority. So it's interesting to look at the minority and see if they're treated the same way as the majority women in nursing. The statistic is that men typically average $10,000 a year more income in their salary than women do in nursing. Now, there's a lot of different theories about this. Why they make more money. Some people tried to say that it was because they worked in management positions, where female nurses typically worked in school nursing positions, or they would take low-paid doctor's office positions because it was good hours and they could be home with their kids on the weekends and at night. But they also theorized with the Wall Street Journal. They wrote a 2012 article saying that men made more because they typically sought out higher degrees. Men were more likely to go for a BSN degree or a doctorate or master's degree over women. Not saying women, of course, don't, but statistically they say that men are more likely to be in those higher degree levels than in LPN or associate's degree or diploma degree nursing. I found another article online that I'll link to you guys in the description below, that was talking about how men seek out ICU nursing more often and seek out flight nursing and nurse anesthesia, things like that. So they seek out the areas in nursing that pay the highest and are more like thrill-seeking specialty fields. And of course, I know plenty of women who work in those areas too. Of course, the field is mostly women, so you'll find plenty of women who work in those areas too, but they say percentage-wise, more men who, out of the 10% of men that go into nursing, more men end up being in those areas of nursing than, say, pediatrics or OBGYN or doctor's offices and things like that. Another article that I read was saying that men were more likely to work weekends and nights and pull overtime shifts. Not to say, of course, women do that too. I don't want any of my female nurse friends to try and skin me alive. Of course, I've worked right alongside you, and I know you work plenty of overtime and weekends too. So I don't know how true that may be. I'm not saying I necessarily support any of these statements. These are just things that I've seen online and theories that certain people have about why statistically men do make more. The only thing that is actual objective data from anything that I've told you so far is that men do, from the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics averages some years ago, men do make $10,000 a year more than women, and they really don't know exactly why. Some people say it's sexism, and then these are other theories of why it might be that way. So I'm not saying I endorse any of these statements, but they're just something that's out there, people theorizing it. Interestingly enough, they actually did a study to ask men and women if they were more satisfied by their pay, and they felt fulfilled and happy with their career and their pay and all of their benefits. And actually, even though women are statistically paid less than men, they actually are percentage-wise more happy than men are with what they're paid. So they were asking, maybe women are happier just and content doing a career they love and enjoy, and perhaps men are seeking out the highest pay that they can get, and until they get the highest pay, they don't feel content. So that's an interesting idea too. I found another article online that's from Retail Perspectives. Retail.com is actually the website, and I just wanted to look over at it here and go over a couple of the points that they said. I thought some of them were kind of interesting and maybe some relevance to it. I wanted to see what you guys thought. They say male nurses were paid more because male nurses do the heavy lifting. Of course, if any of you have worked in a hospital environment, especially ICU or ER, things like that, where there's a lot of males, whenever there's a really heavy patient or something that requires physical strength, a male nurse is usually assigned to that patient. Not all the time, so don't quote me on that it's every single time, but as a male nurse myself, I know I've been requested to take the 350-pound patient before because I physically could handle it, more better than probably my 5-foot coworker who weighs 110 pounds. So that's just logistics. Of course, it doesn't mean a female of that size can't use the proper Hoyer lift and other types of devices that nurses have so that she could be successful in taking care of that patient. I'm just saying, usually charge nurses, they'll just go down the line and they'll just assign patients like that. If it makes sense, they do it. This was a second point they make is kind of interesting, and maybe I've seen this before. They say from a psychological standpoint, kids want to seem tougher in front of a male nurse. They're saying here that if a child has a female nurse come into the room, they might instigate that mother instinct where they want to cry and whine and say they don't want any shots and they want to be babied kind of. But if the male nurse comes in the room, it's more of like a father type response that they have to them, and they want to be tough. And if the male nurse says, I know you're a big guy, I know you can handle this, the child will try and toughen up and seem like they're stronger than they are, and not instigate quite that mothering response that they usually get from a female nurse. Their third point is that male nurses handle overly aggressive patients better. This is again kind of that physical mass thing, that the male nurses are usually just larger, and if you have a combative, angry patient and who has to be physically restrained or is trying to punch at somebody, it's helpful to have a couple male nurses that can run in there and tackle that situation. I know I worked at one hospital that if any psych patient would ever get out of control, they would call a special code overhead, and that code meant all males, including male nurses, were supposed to respond to that floor, to that room, and it was a show of force type thing. And usually the show of force helped avoid actual physical violence, because if 15 male nurses showed up in one spot, that male patient that's getting violent or aggravated will start to calm down and will usually listen to reason and will not try and punch anyone. And if they do try and punch someone, you have 15 guys that can tackle them and hold them down and save the situation from getting really violent. All right, the next one is, I know, gonna kind of get people riled up. They say male nurses are granted more respect than female nurses. Now, I've talked to female nurses about this before. One of my old girlfriends, we dated for years, and she was a female nurse, and she had a certain doctor. We worked at the same hospital, and she had a certain doctor that was very, very rude to her, even though she did nothing wrong to him. He was from a Muslim country originally, and that doctor was very nice to me and treated me like buddies, and he'd come in and pretty much do whatever I asked him that I needed, and we got along very well. He asked me, about sports and, just kind of, stuff males talk about. And we had that kind of jovial talk, and she did not have that kind of male bonding experience with him at all. And in fact, she was dismissed by him many a times. And I've seen that happen in other situations too. It depends on the culture the doctor's from. It doesn't necessarily happen as much with American-born doctors, but with some doctors from other certain countries where females are not quite as respected as much as they are in America yet, they don't really regard the female nurses quite as well as they will some of the males. You could debate that if you want to. I'd be interested in seeing your perspectives on that. It's just something that I've seen. I've worked in a lot of different states all over the United States, and I've seen that a few different situations. The next one kind of makes me laugh a little bit. It says, some patients react better to an imposing masculine figure. And then they go on to say, old ladies love male nurses. This is kind of funny, and I don't understand why this is exactly, but I have experienced old ladies liking me, and not in a weird flirtatious way, not in a sexual way typically, but they do. I don't know if it's because I remind them of their grandson, or if they just like, a young man who's passionate and knowledgeable about stuff, at least in the ICU. That's the only place I've ever worked, is the ICU. So usually they're very, very sick at that point, and I guess they have, you know, some pride in me that I'm like the grandson figure that they see, and that I'm learning about medical stuff and I'm helping to take care of them, and I'm being patient with them and pretty compassionate. So I don't know, maybe that's what it is. I can't speak to it much more beyond just my personal experience with it, but that's something I've seen quite a few times. Although on the flip side of things, I've had some younger males and sometimes older males get very uncomfortable with you as a male nurse, especially if they need something like a catheter done, or they have to, like, something's disabled and they can't do a bath for themselves and you have to come in there and give them a bath. That can be an uncomfortable situation sometimes. You have to break the ice with them, and, you know, after a couple years of experience, I got pretty good at, you know, breaking down that barrier and coming in and you know, us kind of being friendly with each other, and then by the time it was done, it was, you know, like we were friends and it was no big deal. And so you learn to do that as a male nurse. Hopefully you learn to do that, but there are some times where you'll have a person who's just standoffish to you to the point where you got to ask somebody else to take over for the patient for you. So sometimes being a male nurse can work work against you. Their last point is that male nurses feel like they need to be more compassionate than female nurses because they're men, I guess. So they feel like they have to go above and beyond what normal, nursing compassion would be, and in that way they're more compassionate than the female nurse. I don't really agree with that last part at all, and I don't really see that I've done that in my practice. Maybe you have, as other male nurses who might be watching this, or female nurses that are friends with male nurses. Maybe you've seen that. I don't feel like I've not put on any extra amount of compassion than what I naturally have, just to prove that I'm compassionate because I'm a male nurse and not a female nurse. I think male nurses usually have more of a tough love kind of approach to healthcare, and I think that's a good balance. I think it's kind of like having a mom and a dad when you have a female nurse and a male nurse, and a lot of times I feel like the male nurse can get in there and get the job done really quick, and it's a lot less of the whole, fluffing the pillows and how are you feeling kind of sweetness, but it gets the job done, and you know that they care about you, that they're doing everything in the room for you because they care about you. And that's just the way I kind of approach nursing, and I see a lot of my other male counterparts do it more like that. But I'd be interested in to see what you think about it. Well, that's the articles that I found. That's some of the points that I saw come up on the internet. I, of course, have all kinds of anecdotes and things that have happened to me in my nursing experience. Some things that are very funny. Some things I'd love to tell you, but would be totally inappropriate to talk about online. But other nurses would understand the humor, but I wouldn't be allowed to put that out there on YouTube. But I've had many funny things happen to me in my time as a nurse, and things that happen that are exclusively to me being a male nurse that have been funny. But I'd be interested in seeing what you guys have had happen and what your experiences are. And if you agree with this, do you feel like male nurses get paid more than you? If you're a female nurse, do you feel like it's fair that they get paid more than you? Do you feel like that statistic is wrong, or maybe it's changed since then? Put in the comments below what you think. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. All right, that's Bolt out.